Hello everyone, welcome to the Global Sports Channel radio show. It's Monday, December the 14th, 2020. My name is Mark Philpott, the host of the show. Well everyone, welcome to the show, and today we're going to be talking about sailing, boxing, Formula One, football, surfing and a whole lot more. Hope you had a good weekend no matter where you are in the world and that you're staying safe and healthy and happy. Okay, let's get into the show and let's start off with sailing. We've had some pretty wild and windy weather on the sailboat here this past weekend, and nothing like what the Vendee Globe boys and girls are experiencing down there in the Southern Ocean. But it's been a fascinating race over the weekend, and we've seen lots of changes to not only the leaderboard but also to the conditions that the boats are sailing in. So let me bring you up to date with all of that. So first of all, the boats as I speak to you today are actually south of Australia, a long way south of Australia, down towards the ice excursion zone. If you don't know what the ice excursion zone is in the Vendee Globe, it's an area where the organising committee say that the boats cannot go any further south of because they're scared of icebergs having an impact on the fleet. So the last thing you want to do when you're sailing along at 25 knots in one of these amazing foiling boats is to run into an iceberg. That wouldn't be very smart at all. So the organising committee has put a rule in place that you are not allowed to go to a certain latitude south, and they've made that aware to all the competitors, so they must stay north of that. So it's a pretty big area though, and you've got all the boats currently in the Indian Ocean heading towards the bottom of Australia. 3 boats have passed Cape Leeuwin, and the phenomenal thing about this is they all pass Cape Leeuwin within 3 hours of each other, and that's fairly a rare thing that happens in the Vendee Globe. So we've got Charlie Dallin, who's still in the lead on aboard the boat Apivia, and I've been talking about Charlie for quite some time now. He's one of my favourites to win the race this year. A young guy that's really gone up into the world of solo sailing and won some great races prior to this race. And it's his first time aboard Apivia in the Vendee Globe. So interesting to see how he's going. But over the weekend, Charlie got caught in a lot of light airs. And as a result of that, the second place boat, Thomas Rion, on linked out. And also the third place boat, Yannick Bestaven, on board Maitrecock, have caught up to Charlie, and they're only 70 odd nautical miles behind him now. So we really have a race on our hands. And what else happened over the weekend was the conditions started to change for those front runners. So they came out of some light airs after being battered last week by a massive depression that happened in the Indian Ocean. They were having winds up to 60 knots for 24 hours sustained, which is not a nice place to be when you're in a sailboat. Anyway, they've come out of that now, and they're in great conditions for racing. They're in 25 knots of solid wind behind them, and they're averaging 25 to 27 knots, so that's an incredible boat speed, and those 3 are really out in the lead now. Although the good news is the rest of the fleet have compressioned up as well. So we've got 10 boats now in the lead pack, which are all within 400 nautical miles of each other, which is really exciting for this race, because I think that normally in the Vendee Globe, you've got someone who's run away with it at the front and everybody else is trying to chase. But in this particular event, we've got 10 boats now within 400 nautical miles of each other. So it's going to be really, really exciting. And as the other boats get into the Southern Ocean and head towards Cape Leeuwin, I'm sure we're going to see better sailing conditions, and they're going to be able to unleash these boats. Some other mentions today, and I mentioned them on Friday, and I want to just bring everybody up to date with how they're going and where they're at. We've got Amal Tripon, who's aboard L'Occitane de Provence, and he's been doing some phenomenal sailing over the weekend. If you remember from last week, I told you about Amal getting stuck at the beginning of the start with some technical issues of the race, and he's been chasing the leaders ever since. He's only 1,600 nautical miles now behind the leaders, and while that might sound a lot, when you hit light airs in the front and you've still got people coming from behind at a great rate of knots with good winds, that 1,600 nautical miles can really reduce very, very quickly. So Emil Tripon is certainly not out of this race yet, and I suspect by Cape Horn he's going to be a lot closer to the front of the pack than what we see today. He's currently in 14th position overall, and with those top 10 boats within 400 nautical miles of each other, Emil's going to be focused on picking off the boats in between, and that not only gives him good motivation, but it also obviously climbs him up the rankings in this year's event. We've also been following with great interest Jeremy Biu aboard Chirel in this boat, and if you remember from my previous commentaries, Jeremy had to return to Sable-Dion in France after the start of the race with some damage, and he ended up starting the race 9 days after everybody else. Well, the great news today is that Jeremy is now in position 25 out of the 27 remaining boats, and he's some 3,600 kilometres behind the leaders at this stage. But the great news for Jeremy is that by catching the back end of the fleet, he's going to be highly motivated now because he can start to pick his way through the fleet. He has one of the fastest boats in the race, and he was one of the favourites to win this year's Vendee Globe. He's only 100 nautical miles behind the boat that's in 21st position, so even though he's in 27th, he can make up that time pretty easily, and I suspect by the end of the week he's going to be chasing across the Southern Ocean in charge of those 20 boats in front of him at that stage. Now, a number of boats have retired and they return to Cape Town in South Africa, where they have either undergone repairs or their boat's going to be put on a ship and shipped back to wherever they've come from. But one of those boats that's going to be repaired and carried on in this particular event is going to be Sam Davies on Initiative's Courier. Although Sam has actually been disqualified from the event because she has had ground support, and that's a no-no in this race, she has decided to repair her boat along with her crew and splash back in the water again and head off back around the world. So there's a great example of courage and determination from Sam Davies, who's aboard Initiative's Courier. She's also doing a lot of work on this particular run for charity, so that was one of the major, I guess, motivations for her to return to the oceans, and we should be seeing her splash into the water in Cape Town over the next 48 hours or so, I'd say, and rejoining, trying to catch these boats that are officially still in the race, and we'll see what Sam can do. That's going to be interesting. I'll keep a lookout for her. But I'm really loving this race because what it's showing is that the new technology is not always the best, and we're seeing some of the old wily sailors, the grumpy old sailors, doing very, very well in this race. Jean Le Cam keeps surprising. He's up into 4th place. He's got one of the older generation boats, but it's what's going on up here that's helping these guys and the strategies they're adopting. Plus, a lot of these new boats are having to look after their boats in wild weather because they just can't get the maximum out of them because they're worried about breaking and damaging them. So that's kind of leveling the whole playing field in the Vendee Globe, and that's what I'm finding really, really fascinating about it. So I don't think we know who the winner is going to be yet. I think there's still going to be some tales to tell in this particular race. Don't forget, normally 50% of the fleet have to retire. We've only had 5 boats come out of the 32 so far, so we're probably due for some more damage, unfortunately, to some of the other boats as we go. But we'll have to keep track of that. Now, turning our attention to the other major sailing event that's going on, or was going on over the weekend, and that was the Jules Verne Trophy. And Sodibo was trying to break the world record of travelling around the planet on a massive 75-foot trimaran with a crew of 8 people. And they were trying to go around the world in less than 41 days. Well, unfortunately, over the weekend, Sodibo has retired from their record-breaking attempt. Yes, whilst in the Southern Ocean, not too far away from the Vendee Globe fleet, Sodibo has encountered some rudder problems and some rudder damage. And when you're going along on a trimaran foiling at 35, 36 knots, you cannot have a broken rudder. It just doesn't work. So the crew spent a lot of time talking to their shore crew and trying to find a way to repair this rudder, but in the end they were not able to do it, and they decided, I guess, to aid on the caution of safety and making sure that everybody got back alive from this particular attempt. They decided to retire from this particular attempt of breaking the world record going around the world on a sailboat. So what's happened now is Thomas Coville, who is the skipper of Sodibo, has decided to finish it and take the boat back and repair it. And who knows, I think Thomas is, I've read a lot about Thomas, he's a very clever, very humble man he will be already planning his next attempt, I'm sure, because he wants to try and be the first skipper to go around the world in a sailboat in under 40 days. Wouldn't that be an extraordinary achievement indeed? So there we are. Bad news. The Jules Verne Trophy attempt, Sadibo, is all over, and those guys will now be returning to safety. I think they'll be heading to Cape Town as well, which seems to be the place where everybody goes when your boat is damaged. Hello to everyone listening in Cape Town today. Beautiful city. Love the place. Okay, Formula One. And yes, we had the last race of the season over the weekend. And I must say, what a boring race it was. And unfortunately, Formula One is stuck in this, and I want to talk a little bit about it today. But a couple of major things happened in this particular event this weekend. The first one was the return of Lewis Hamilton. And as I said on Friday, I wasn't one of the people that was happy to see Lewis back. I wanted to see George Russell in that Mercedes again and given another opportunity to right the wrongs of what happened in Sakhir that last weekend. But it wasn't to be. Lewis and his ego came back, and they wanted to be in the car, or Lewis wanted to be in the car no matter what this weekend. And even though he supposedly recovered from COVID-19, he decided that he would be in the car, in the Mercedes, for this weekend's race. And it was obvious during qualifying he wasn't up to it. He came in third position, and in that car that's been beating everybody all year. Obviously, he was really struggling physically, which he admitted to afterwards. But again, you know, he could have sat out and said, hey, George, you take care of the Mercedes again for this weekend. But no, Lewis Hamilton's not the kind of guy to do that. And a lot of people will say, well, you know, he's a professional athlete and he loves to be in there in the mix of competition. And yeah, sure, he does. And he always wants to be in there no matter what. So what happened on Saturday in qualifying was quite interesting, because Max Verstappen in the Red Bull actually got pole position, and that was an extraordinary turnaround of events. The Mercedes guys, Bottas and Hamilton, just couldn't get the tyres working. Once again, Pirelli have turned up to a Formula One race with tyres that have a huge question mark over them, and I don't know when the Formula One and Liberty International are going to do something about Pirelli, because they are destroying Formula One with the brand of tyres they are bringing to these races. And the drivers have been complaining all year and last year, but there seems to be no light at the end of the tunnel. So yeah, I'm being fairly direct and hard today, because I think some of these sports need to take a good look at themselves, and Formula One is one of them as well. So qualifying, we saw Max Verstappen in first place, Valtteri Bottas from Mercedes in second place, and Lewis Hamilton in third place. And that's exactly how they finished in the race after an extremely boring race. And unfortunately, Abu Dhabi as a racing circuit is exactly that. It's a very boring track. And while we all sit there and watch on television the beautiful Yas Marina complex and all the starry lights and the big super yachts, the Formula One track is extremely boring. And as we saw again last night, produced another boring race. And I think this is one of the things that Formula One, the FIA, Liberty Media and everybody else has to take a look at, because we're living with a bit of a legacy here of the German engineer Hermann Tilke, who actually was a friend of Bernie Ecclestone's back in the day. And when Bernie was running F1, he brought all his mates in to do all of the engineering work and track designs. And Hermann Tilke was one of those mates of Bernie Ecclestone that got a job to design some of the racetracks around the world. I think he did Sepang, he did China, he did Bahrain, and they are some of the most boring tracks in Formula One. So they can do all they want as far as getting tyres and getting cars aerodynamically changed for regulations in the next couple of years, but if they don't sort out some of the tracks that they race on, then we're going to keep seeing boring races. So I think that's another bug that I have with Formula One, is they've got to really sort out what they're doing with the racetracks that they race on. And you take Mugello as an example. We saw the race in Mugello this year, a fantastic race, great track, the drivers love it, and as a result we saw a fantastic race. So those are the types of tracks that we need to be on. Tracks like Singapore, where you can't overtake hardly, or there's only two corners on the track where you can overtake, and you're waiting for attrition of cars because it's such a long race. I think we've got to change the whole Formula One ethos a bit to get a bit more exciting racing. A couple other things that happened in the weekend that were big news was we saw Alex Albon do a very good result in fourth place, and maybe, just maybe, it was enough to save his drive at Red Bull for next year. But my money's still on Sergio Perez getting that seat in the Red Bull next year. We're going to find out in due course, but well done Alex Albon, getting up there into 4th place, showing a little bit of potential. I think he finished the race about 30 seconds behind Max Verstappen, his teammate in the Red Bull, but he kept the Mercedes honest this weekend, and they weren't able to change their strategy too much because Alex was pretty much close on their heel. Now, a good result for McLaren over the weekend. They were 5th and 6th in the race, and more importantly, that confirmed them as 3rd in the Constructors' Championship for this year. So that's really big news for McLaren, coming in behind Mercedes, Red Bull, and now coming in behind for 3rd position. And as a result of that, McLaren actually get an extra $10 million in prize money. So that's going to be a huge investment for them. And some other big news that's just about to be announced, I think it'll come out today, that McLaren are going to be having a new investor called MSP Sports Capital from the United States. They're going to inject £185 million into McLaren in the next couple of years, and this is really going to give McLaren a good shoot in the arm. It's been a lot of speculation around their financial capacity this year in 2020 because of COVID and some other things that have been going on in their operation. But this injection of capital is really going to be a good thing for McLaren. And don't forget, you've got Daniel Ricciardo going there driving next year. So they're really investing to try and get to the top again of the Formula One paddock. And I think they're going to have a good chance to do that in the next couple of years. I'm not too sure 2021 will be a year for them, but I think 2022 is going to be a really significant year for McLaren to get back into the fray within the Formula One higher echelons. So there we go, a wrap for the Formula One season. No changing to the standings. Of course, Lewis Hamilton had already won the championship for this year before the last race. So he ends up the Formula One World Champion for 2020. We don't have too long before we hopefully will see the Australian Grand Prix in March 2021. Australia is COVID free, so hopefully we can set up a quarantine bubble if the case is required by March for the Formula One teams to come down here and race and to have a full crowd in participation again in Melbourne, Australia. Wouldn't that be great for Formula One and for sports in general? Okay, let's move on. Time to talk boxing. Yes, over the weekend we had a world heavyweight bout in the UK. And for those that haven't heard the result yet, I'll tell you right now. We had Anthony Joshua up against Kubrat Pulev. Pulev from Bulgaria was fighting not only for his country but also for his status within the sport, 39-year-old. And I picked on Friday that we might see an upset. I thought that Pulev might come in and actually catch Anthony Joshua with an unsuspecting punch. It didn't happen. I was wrong. And Anthony Joshua outclassed Pulev over the weekend. Quite extraordinary, in fact. So Pulev went down in the 3rd round. Joshua took his foot off the gas a little bit, I thought, in rounds 4, 5 and 6. It allowed Pulev to get a little bit of motivation back, but then Joshua put the foot down again. In round 9 he knocked him out and the lights went out for Kubrat Pulev. But I've got to say, the guy can take a punch. He took a lot of punches from Joshua, and I'm sure Joshua was pretty surprised that he didn't go down and stay down a little bit earlier than what he did. But this was a really interesting fight for me because I can't wait to see the Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua fight like most of the planet. And I think a couple of really interesting things came out of this fight in the weekend. I'm just going to talk about those now. The first one is, I think if the fight happens between Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua, I can't see Anthony Joshua winning that fight. And here's why I can't see Joshua winning that fight. If you watch that Pulev fight over and over again, like I have in the last few hours, I see Joshua not being sure on his strategy, whether to come forward, whether to be patient, and he changes his fight plan during his fight. He can't afford to do that against Tyson Fury, and we've seen Fury really step up to a new level, I think, in taking out Deontay Wilder in his last fight. Fury had to come in with a new plan against Deontay Wilder, and I think Deontay Wilder was one of the most explosive and potentially dangerous opponents in the heavyweight division at the moment. And Fury came in and nullified that and took that power away from Wilder, and he was able to combat it with his own strength and power. And I think Tyson Fury is going to do exactly the same thing to Anthony Joshua. And I don't think Anthony Joshua can adapt well enough in the ring. I hope I'm wrong, and I hope that Anthony Joshua proves me wrong, because I think the guy's a good guy. But I just see Tyson Fury having too many different strategic weapons to take down Anthony Joshua in this fight if it's going to happen. And I talk about that because in the world of heavyweight boxing, most of the egos are outside of the ring. And we've got promoters, we've got television audiences, and we've got TV broadcasting units. And all these stars need to align before these fights can actually happen. And I know that it took 7 years back in the day for Ali and Fraser to actually come to fruition. Same with Lennox Lewis and Mike Tyson. That fight took 7 years to make happen as well. And even though it looks like everything's in order for this fight to happen, there's going to be a couple of problems come up along the way. One of them is Deontay Wilder and a contract that he has to fight Tyson Fury. And the other one is Usyk, who is a Russian fighter who has a mandatory fight against Tyson Fury as well. So we're going to have to see whether or not these things can be managed. And of course, money talks. So people can be brought out of contracts, of course. But the super fight that the world wants to see right now is Anthony Joshua versus Tyson Fury. Will it happen in 2021? I sure as heck hope it does. And I hope we get to see what happens between Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury. So there we go. Anthony Joshua successful in the weekend with a 9th round knockout of Bulgarian Kubrat Pulev, who now goes home to Bulgaria with a bit of a wounded ego, I would say, after, if you watched the press conference before the fight, he had a lot to say about what he was going to do in the fight that didn't come to fruition. So there we go. Boxing done and dusted for this year, and we'll wait to see what mega fights we get in 2021. Okay, folks, time for some football. So let's head over now and talk with David Barbash. He's going to bring us up to date with what happened across the English Premier League in the weekend. David, all over to you, mate.
Thanks, Mark. Welcome, everyone, to the Premier League review show on week 12 at the Global Sports Channel. I'm your host, David Barbash. Thanks for following us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And if you haven't got your free trial membership already, you can get that at globalsportschannel.com. Let's dive right into it. The first game up was the only game on Friday, and that was Leeds United, my team for the last 50 years or so. They were host to West Ham and David Moyes' side. David Moyes' side coming in hotter, having won 3 out of the last 5. Leeds having lost 3 out of the last 5. My team, Leeds United, got off to a great start. In the 5th minute, Patrick Bamford's brought down in the box by the West Ham keeper. Up steps Matthias Klick. He has his penalty saved. However, the VAR determines that the West Ham keeper had moved off his line. Klick with the retaken penalty, and he converts this time 1-0 to Leeds. Leeds had a couple of chances, so did West Ham. However, in the 25th minute, corner comes in, and Tomas Souček converts the header. Meslier made a mess of it in the Leeds goal. He should have saved the header, but he flapped at the ball and it went in over the line. No chance for redemption there. However, in the second half, Meslier did come to the rescue for Leeds a few times. So I think, given the fact that he saved them 2 or 3 times in the second half, it was all to play for with 10 minutes to go. And then West Ham awarded a free kick given away by Helder Costa from about 25 yards out. Called in free kick, Angel Ogbonna. He rises up and he converts the header. West Ham take all 3 points. They move up from 8th place into 6th place. Leeds slip down into 14th place. Actually, they stay in 14th place, Leeds do. Next up on Saturday, the first game on Saturday was Wolves missing Raul Jimenez, their talismanic striker, out for a number of months with a skull fracture. They were playing host to the Villains from Aston Villa. I thought this would be a draw. I thought it'd be a really tight affair. A very tight affair. It stayed 0-0 going into injury time in the second half, with almost one of the last kicks of the game. A penalty is awarded. Looked like Nelson Semedo gave up the foul in the box. Up steps Anwar El Ghazi for the Villains. He converts the penalty. There was a bit of a dispute and unsportsmanlike conduct by Joao Moutinho for Wolves. He was sent off in the 95th minute, and he'll be missing for a few games for them. Wolves didn't need that at this point. They ended up losing the game 1-0 to Aston Villa. Aston Villa moves up into 10th. Wolves slipped down to 13th. Newcastle were the second game on Saturday. They were the hosts to West Bromwich Albion, Slavan Bilic's side, and they needed to move out of the bottom two. It wasn't really a fabulous game for West Brom. They only had 4 shots on target, 8 shots on goal for Newcastle, 7 shots on target. However, what a great start for Newcastle. Miguel Almiron scoring in the first minute. They look to go up 1-0 at half-time. Darnell Furlong equalised for West Bromwich Albion in the 50th minute. However, the ex-West Bromwich Albion player Dwight Gale comes on as sub in the 69th minute. He converts in the 82nd minute, the winner for his new side, Newcastle United. They take all 3 points. They move up into 12th position. West Brom in 19th place. The next game was Manchester United in a rather tepid affair against Manchester City. Manchester United, they come into the game in 6th place, Manchester City in 7th. They really didn't do much. 8 shots on goal for Manchester United. Only 5 shots on goal, only 2 on target for Manchester City, despite starting Mahrez, Sterling, Ferran Torres and Gabriel de Jesus. For some reason, they didn't really change things up a lot. And it ended up a 0-0 draw. Manchester United, Rashford up front, as well as Mason and Greenwood. It ended up a draw, 1 apiece. The last game on Saturday was Everton playing host to Chelsea, and Frank Lampard's side coming in pretty rare form. 4 wins, 1 draw, no losses in the last 5. Everton, however, having lost 3 out of the last 5. I had predicted a Chelsea win. What do I know? Form goes out the window despite 72% possession for Chelsea. Everton given a penalty in the 21st minute. Up steps Gylfi Sigurdsson. He converts the penalty. And Chelsea huffed and puffed in the second half. Timo Werner, Kai Havertz and Olivier Giroud, didn't matter. They have an off day at the races, and Everton surprises. They take the 3 points. They move up in the table to 7th position, and Chelsea slip back into 5th place. Now we're on to Sunday, and Sunday's first game was Southampton. The Saints, my preferred side, against a tepid Sheffield United that I feel for, sitting in currently last place, 20th position, only 1 point out of the last 11. The form and their luck and fortune did not change. 34th minute, and a great goal by Shea Adams for Southampton. He puts them up 1-0. We go into the second half, and boom, another goal scored this time by Stuart Armstrong for Southampton. And in the 83rd minute, Nathan Redmond scores for the Saints, and Southampton takes all 3 points, a 3-0 win. They move up, the Saints, into 4th place. They had 68% possession in the game, 13 shots on goal. Sheffield United, wow, doesn't get worse than this. 12 games played, 1 point, no wins, and no shots on target in the game. It's going to take a lot for them to get out of the bottom three, in my estimation. And Chris Wilder's run of form for that team compared to last year, it's like night and day. So hopefully they can change things around. In the meantime, we moved on to the next game. Crystal Palace playing host to Jose Mourinho's side, Tottenham. Crystal Palace up and down. The last game that they played looks like last week. When we look at the form, Crystal Palace, they had a massive 5-1 win against West Bromwich Albion. Tottenham, they last game won 2-0 at Arsenal. First strike taken by Tottenham. Harry Kane with an absolute, swerver from about 26, 27 yards out. Long distance shot. Should have been saved by the keeper. He didn't save the swerve until the last minute. He should have saved it. It went in. Crystal Palace were down at the break. Crystal Palace really have their keeper to thanks because Vicente Gaeta pulled off 4 or 5 world-class top draw saves out of the book. He saves them. Jeffrey Schlupp comes with the equaliser in the 81st minute. I don't know how, but in the 93rd minute, up steps Eric Dyer for the win for Tottenham Hotspur, and it's going into the top corner, and no, hold your horses. Vicente Gaeta with the top draw save. He saves the day for Crystal Palace. It ends up 1 apiece. Tottenham stay in first place. Crystal Palace, they move up into 11th place. The next game was Fulham at home to Liverpool. Liverpool come in looking for the win to move up into first place. And Fulham looking to move out of the bottom 3. Fulham, it looked good. I have to say, they looked very, very good, Fulham. They had 2 great chances on goal in the first 15 minutes. They were both saved. Should have done better. They were both saved by Alisson in goal for Liverpool. But Bobby Reid did not make a mistake for Fulham in the 25th minute. They could have been up 3 or 4-0 at the break. Instead, they were up 1-0 due to a fantastic conversion by Bobby Reid. Second half really didn't change much. Liverpool started to grow into the game. They started to have more possession. However, it took a free kick that was awarded to Liverpool. From the free kick, it was blocked by Kamara, but as he turned his back to block the ball, it struck his arm. Penalty kick was awarded. Up steps Mo Salah, and Mo Salah scores the penalty kick, and it goes, that was in the 79th minute, it goes to a final score of 1 apiece, 1-1. Liverpool, second place. Fulham, surprisingly, dropped down into 18th place. Arsenal were next up. They were playing host to Burnley and the Clarets. Burnley coming in 18th place, looking to move out of the bottom 3. Arsenal come in 15th place. Mikel Arteta's side needs to start scoring. Aubameyang and Lacazette have really let him down with the lack of goals this year. Well, it was a pretty anemic affair for Arsenal. Chris Wood with a chance in the first 20 minutes, missed a header. Arsenal had a chance from, I believe, looks like his header, Rob Holding, was headed over also in the first 20 minutes. But it was 0-0 at half time. It continued a pretty tepid affair in the second half. It went down to an own goal in the 71st minute by Aubameyang. This was 23 minutes after Saka had been sent off for 15 minutes, earlier for Arsenal. He had grabbed the player from Burnley's throat. No doubt a red card was warranted. The lack of discipline by Mikel Arteta's side, it concerns me. They've had 6 red cards for the campaign so far. The nearest team after them is 3. So they've got literally 100% more red cards than any other team in the Premier League, and after 12 games. So Mikel Arteta's side loses the 3 points to Burnley. They stay in 15th place. Burnley moves up into 17th place. The last game for week 12 was Leicester at home to the Seagulls from Brighton. Leicester with a win would move them up into the top 3. They looked really good. I predicted a Leicester win. They didn't disappoint. A brace from James Maddison, the first debut from about 23 yards out. And then 44th minute, he scored his second. Sandwiched in between that in the 41st minute was another clinical finish by Jamie Vardy. They take all 3 points and they move up into 3rd place. Brighton, they slip down into 16th, stay into 16th place. And that's it for week 12.
Okay, thanks for that, David. Great to hear the wrap-up, and Liverpool having a draw there in the weekend. Mr. Klopp won't be too happy about that, I'm sure. And a bit of soul-searching going there. They had a chance to go top of the ladder, didn't they, Liverpool, if they'd won that particular match. Now we're going to talk about surfing for a minute, because I had an audience member write into me during the week and say to me, hey, are you going to cover the Banzai Pipeline contest that's taking place in Hawaii? And I said, yeah, why not? Let's do that. And over the weekend I did my research, and unfortunately I've got some bad news to share this morning, because the World Surfing League has had to cancel this event at the Banzai Pipeline, which is on the north shore of the famous island of Oahu in Hawaii. And the event's been cancelled because some of the World Surfing League actual staff members contracted COVID-19, and it was deemed too dangerous, and also had a big draw on their resources to put this event together, with so many staff being affected from the World Surfing League. So unfortunately the Banzai Pipeline event is not going ahead at the moment. I'm sure it'll be rescheduled again, but that's really unfortunate, because we saw some fantastic surf happening at Banzai Pipeline. The swell was tremendous, and we were in for a treat of great surfing, but it just wasn't to be, and it's not going to happen, unfortunately. So there we go, no surfing for now, but I'm sure we'll catch up with some more surfing events in the not too distant future. Okay, some quick news now for some other sports and to see what's been going on around the world. Let's go to New Zealand first of all, where New Zealand are playing the West Indies in a test series. And the New Zealand team, the Black Caps, are on verge of another victory. Now, if you don't know much about Test cricket, well, the Kiwis are actually ranking first in the world with Australia at the moment in Test cricket. I don't think they've been beaten in New Zealand for about 8 or 9 series. So that's been quite a phenomenal fortress that the Kiwis have got in New Zealand. The second test is currently being played in Wellington in New Zealand. They had a little bit of rain there this morning, but the covers have come off, and the play is going to get underway in New Zealand shortly. And when they do, the West Indies are going to resume their second innings at 6 for 244. Jason Holder, the captain, is holding up, excuse the pun, the team, and I think what is going to be a for sure defeat there. They're trailing the Kiwis by 85 runs to make the Kiwis bat again, but Jason Holder is doing his best to prolong the pain there on the West Indies. So 244 for 6. They need another 85 runs to make New Zealand bat again. I don't think that's going to happen. I think the Kiwis are going to wrap up the tail over there in Wellington to go 2-0 up in the series. So that's what's happening in New Zealand. Now the Big Bash is underway here in Australia, the T20 Cricket Tournament that goes on every year over the Christmas and New Year period. We had a big game in the weekend. The Sydney Sixers scored 205 for 4 off their 20 overs. And the Melbourne Renegades, well, they capitulated. Yes, they were all out for 60 after just 10.4 overs. 60 runs off 10 overs, and that is the second to lowest score ever recorded in the Big Bash League. So the Melbourne Renegades won't be too happy about that. If we look at the competition in general, the Melbourne Stars currently lead the competition on 8 points, and the Hobart Hurricanes are in second place on 7 points. A host of games coming up this week in the Big Bash, and I'll bring you some more results from that on Friday's show. So there we go. And one last piece of news that you might want to know about, or you may not want to know about. There's a guy called Cody Simpson. He's an Australian swimmer, and he was more famous up until recently for being the boyfriend of Miley Cyrus. That's right. In August, unfortunately, him and Miley broke their relationship up, and Cody Simpson decided he wanted to pursue a career in swimming. Well, the good news for Cody is his dream to be an Olympic swimmer just got one step closer. He's qualified now for the Australian Olympic trials in his favoured event of butterfly, and we will see what happens with Cody Simpson, the ex-boyfriend of Miley Cyrus, who has done an extraordinary thing in the swimming pool over the weekend. So we'll follow Cody and see whether he makes his dream come true of getting to the Olympic Games. Well, there we are, folks. The end of the show for Monday, December the 14th in 2020. I hope you're all doing well. I'll be back again on Friday, previewing next weekend's sports and heading into Christmas. We'll have a few extras as well, talking about the America's Cup that's about to get underway in New Zealand, and a few other things that we'll wrap up before the year comes to an end in the world of sports. Thanks for joining us here on the Global Sports Channel. If you haven't checked out our website, head on over to globalsportschannel.com. and follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. We'd love to hear your comments and feedback about the show. And if there's any particular sport you want us to cover here on the Global Sports Channel radio show. Until Friday, have a great week, everyone. I'll see you again then.